The Horror Girlfriend. David was an ordinary young man, living a quiet life in the suburbs of New York. He worked a mundane office job and often spent his evenings scrolling through dating apps, though hoping to find someone special. One day, he matched with a woman named Evelyn. She was breathtakingly beautiful, dark hair, piercing green eyes, and a mysterious smile that seemed to hide 1,000 secrets. Their conversations flowed effortlessly. Evelyn had an enigmatic charm, speaking of old books, forgotten legends, and strange tales. Within a week, David felt as if he'd known her forever. She agreed to meet him at an old cafe on the outskirts of town. The cafe was dimly lit, filled with the aroma of roasted coffee and faint whispers of jazz music. Evelyn arrived dressed in black, her presence commanding the attention of everyone around her. They talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. But there was something strange. Every time David asked about her past, she skillfully dodged the question. As the evening progressed, Evelyn leaned closer and whispered, "I have a secret, but I can only share it with someone I trust completely." Intrigued, David nodded eagerly. Evelyn smiled and said, "Soon." Over the next few weeks, David noticed strange occurrences. Evelyn never appeared in any photos. Her reflection didn't show in mirrors, and her hands were always icy cold, no matter the weather. When he asked her about these things, she brushed them off with a playful laugh. One night, David decided to surprise Evelyn by visiting her apartment. She had always avoided letting him come over, claiming she preferred to meet outside. He found her address from her texts and arrived at an old, crumbling building that looked abandoned. The air was heavy with silence, and the windows were shrouded in black curtains. When he knocked on the door, it creaked open on its own. Inside, the apartment was eerily cold, and the walls were lined with old photographs of people with blank, soulless eyes. As he ventured further, he found a journal on a table. Flipping through it, he realized it wasn't Evelyn's. It belonged to her victims. Each entry described a man she had lured, loved, and ultimately destroyed. David's hands trembled as he read the final entry. It described a man who had grown suspicious, just like him. The journal spoke of how Evelyn trapped her victims in eternal torment, draining their souls to sustain her own existence. Suddenly, the air turned colder, and the faint scent of roses mixed with decay wafted through the room. David noticed something else. One photograph stood out among the rest. It showed Evelyn standing beside a man who bore an uncanny resemblance to him. The date in the corner read 1884. "How is this possible?" David whispered, his breath visible in the freezing air. A soft chuckle echoed behind him. He turned abruptly to find Evelyn standing in the doorway, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "You weren't supposed to find that," she said, her voice calm, yet menacing. Evelyn walked toward him slowly, her every step sending waves of fear coursing through his body. "Do you want to know my secret now, David?" she whispered. Before he could respond, her form began to shift. Her hair floated unnaturally, her skin turning pale and translucent. Veins like dark rivers beneath her surface. Her eyes became black voids, her mouth stretching unnaturally wide, revealing sharp, jagged teeth. "I told you I'm not like you," she hissed. "I feed on the lonely, the broken, like you." David stumbled back, knocking over a chair. He grabbed the journal and sprinted toward the door, but Evelyn's voice stopped him. "Do you think you can leave?" she said, her voice filled with mockery. "You're mine now, David." As David bolted out of the apartment, the walls seemed to pulse, shadows stretching and twisting to block his path. The hallway outside, had become an endless maze, the doors disappearing as he ran. He screamed, pounding on the walls, but his voice only echoed back at him. Finally, a door appeared at the end of the corridor. He burst through it and found himself outside, gasping for air. The cold night seemed almost welcoming compared to the suffocating darkness inside. But Evelyn's laughter echoed in the wind. "You can't escape me," she called out, her voice unnervingly close. David reached his car and fumbled with the keys, but the engine wouldn't start. Panic-stricken, he grabbed the silver cross hanging from his rearview mirror and clutched it tightly. Evelyn materialized in the passenger seat, her monstrous grin inches from his face. "That won't save you," she said. Desperate, David swung the cross at her, and she shrieked, vanishing into a cloud of smoke. David bolted into the nearby woods, branches clawing at his clothes and face. The shadows seemed alive, whispering his name, and Evelyn's voice intermingled with the rustling leaves. He stumbled into a clearing and spotted an old chapel, its wooden doors slightly ajar. Without hesitation, he ran inside, slamming the doors shut behind him. The chapel was eerily quiet, illuminated by faint moonlight filtering through broken stained glass windows. David spotted an ancient Bible on the altar and began flipping through its pages, searching for anything that could help him. "You think this place will save you?" Evelyn's voice echoed, soft but omnipresent. She materialized in the corner, her body twisted and contorted. "This is your end, David," she whispered. David found a passage and began reading aloud. Evelyn screamed, her body convulsing as light filled the room. "You can't destroy me," she hissed. "I will always be with you." With one final scream, she vanished into a cloud of black smoke. David was found wandering the woods the next morning, muttering about shadows and whispers. He moved out of the city, but Evelyn's memory haunted him. Sometimes, he'd catch glimpses of her reflection in windows or hear her laughter in the wind. No matter how far he ran, David knew one thing: Evelyn wasn't gone. She was waiting, lurking in the shadows, ready to return when he least expected it. The end.